Welcome back to the France 24 Newsroom. I'm Brian Quinn. This is Eye on Africa. Tonight, Tunisia prepares to bid a final farewell to President Beji Caid Essebsi with a state funeral Saturday, the country entering 7 days of mourning as it prepares snap elections to choose his successor. Dozens of bodies have now been recovered after boats carrying hundreds of migrants sank off the coast of Libya Thursday, UN officials calling it the worst Mediterranean tragedy so far this year. And some 1.6 million people are at risk of severe food shortages in Mozambique after a pair of powerful cyclones killed hundreds amid widespread destruction earlier this spring. We start in Tunisia, where preparations are underway for the funeral of President Beji Caid Essebsi. Essebsi was the country's first democratically elected leader following the Arab Spring uprising that toppled dictator General Abidine Ben Ali in 2011. Essebsi's death Thursday at the age of 92 has raised fears of political unrest in what has become the Arab Spring's lone democratic success story. The government, though, working to organize elections as early as September 15th to preserve the country's young democracy. France 24's Nadia Massi is in Tunis. She joins us now. Nadia, Essebsi's state funeral set to be a pretty major affair tomorrow. Talk to us about the plans for that ceremony.
A small private affair was held with Essebsi's family today, and tomorrow will be the major state funeral. Emmanuel Macron among some of the world leaders that will attend. That also includes the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman. Now, sometime after 11 o'clock tomorrow morning, the president's body will be brought from the presidential palace and will be given a little bit of a tour through the centre of Tunis, particularly the areas that were so emblematic during the Arab Spring revolution, which brought him to power. And after that, the formal ceremony will be held. And after that, he'll be laid to rest in a Muslim burial.
Well, Nadia, Essebsi was certainly a very venerated figure across Tunisia. One of his main tasks, though, was to revive the Tunisian economy. There's a good amount of criticism on his record there. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, he's venerated here in Tunisia because he is the country's first democratically elected president, and by many people's standards, he really managed to unify the country, coming in after the Arab Spring Revolution that could have been a real moment of instability, as it was in neighbouring countries like Libya. But instead, he brought the country together. Even though he was a long-time secularist, he came into power with Islamist parties. He ushered in a new constitution for the country, tried to improve women's rights, improve security as well. But as you said, the economy is a key area where he really failed to deliver. It was the economy, we remember, of course, that sparked the Arab Spring Revolution here to begin with. And all these years later, the economy, by most metrics, isn't doing any better. In fact, it's doing worse. The unemployment rate here in Tunisia stands at 15%, and that's up from 12% several years ago. And so the question will be, as Tunisia looks to elect its second democratic president, is can they finally do what Essebsi failed to do and bring about meaningful change to improve the country's economy?
Well, that's France 24's Nadia Massi joining us from Tunis, where the funeral of President Essebsi will be held tomorrow. Thanks very much, Nadia. Well, to Libya next, where the country's Coast Guard has recovered the bodies of dozens of migrants who died at sea in what the UN is calling the worst Mediterranean tragedy so far this year. Some 150 people, including women and children, went missing when their boats carrying hundreds of migrants bound for Europe capsized and sank Thursday off the coast of the Libyan city of Homs. Human rights groups are calling on the EU to reverse its decision to halt rescue missions in the Mediterranean. Cole Stangler and Emerald Maxwell report.
A grisly sight on the shores of Homs, east of Tripoli. The same place 3 boats filled with migrants had set off from. 150 people are presumed dead after the vessels capsized not far from the coast. Another 140 people were rescued and brought back here to Homs. A harrowing experience for the survivors.
We started swimming for almost 7 hours, and then we were rescued by fishermen. We've been here for 2 days, and no one has come to take us. There's been a dead body with us here for the past 2 days. It's like we were fighting death in the sea, and now we're fighting death on the ground.
The latest tragedy is the deadliest in the Mediterranean so far this year. The UN says it should lead to action.
We must now see a change in approach to the situation in Libya and the Mediterranean that has as its core saving lives as a priority. We must see more search and rescue boats operating on the Mediterranean, as well as the immediate release of people from these detention centres in Libya, and for states to help us evacuate refugees out of Libya to safety.
The EU has been criticized for partnering with Libya to prevent migrants from making the journey to Europe. Earlier this week, European ministers met in Paris to discuss alternative approaches. Rights groups have repeatedly called for survivors not to be returned to war-torn Libya, where they're routinely jailed in inhumane conditions. At least 2,500 migrants are detained in centers in and around Tripoli.
Next, Algerians took to the streets Friday for their 23rd straight week of protests. Turnout staying high as protesters demand the departure of interim President Abdelkader Ben Salah and Prime Minister Noureddine Bedoui. Both are seen as remnants of a network of insiders that has controlled the country since its independence from France in 1962. Demonstrators also targeting a 6-member mediation panel set up Thursday to organize elections following the resignation of President Abdelaziz Bouteflika in April. That panel's members were chosen by the interim government. Protesters say it's just another way for the old guard to maintain control over the country's future. Some 1.6 million people are at risk of severe food shortages in Mozambique after a pair of powerful cyclones killed hundreds and wrought widespread destruction earlier this year. Authorities say the situation is likely to worsen during the dry season, which is set to begin in October. Clément Bonnereau has the story.
Cyclone Idai and Cyclone Kenneth struck just 6 weeks apart. Minda Guicedo's house was damaged by flooding. The 34-year-old widow now lives in this resettlement camp with her mother and 3 children.
Suddenly, the roof was gone and the house was surrounded by water. There were waves inside the house.
Like Minda, hundreds of thousands of Mozambicans still live in temporary accommodation. Many rely on aid, but now the World Food Programme is trying to get them to grow their own food. About 300 families have been given small plots of land to farm on.
We're helping them clear land and pay them with food. We're helping them doing small irrigation canals. We are helping them to basically have plant nurseries.
Many crops were about to be harvested when the 2 cyclones destroyed hundreds of thousands of hectares of farmland. The UN estimates that 1.6 million people are now at risk of severe food shortages. The mayor of Beira, the country's second largest city, is calling on international donors for more help.
What is happening that side is also affecting we here, innocent people. And now we are applying from them resources to rebuild ourselves. And those resources are not taking place yet.
The UN warns that the worst may be yet to come. The lean season is due to start in October. It's the annual period when food is most scarce. This year is expected to be particularly bad.
And finally, an emotional send-off for celebrated singer Johnny Clegg. The South African musician died on July 16th following a long battle with cancer. He was nicknamed the White Zulu for his blend of Zulu rhythms with Western musical styles. Clegg's children, celebrities, and fans gathered for a memorial in Johannesburg Friday to sing his songs. During the apartheid era, Clegg was repeatedly arrested and censored by the minority white government for performing with black musicians. South Africa's culture minister says Clegg and his music will remain part of the country's national memory. We leave you with these images.
Liberté, égalité, actualité.